seat. Telling the truth is a revolutionary act. It's the David Knight Show.
Well, it's an absolute pleasure to be here, everyone. What a terrific opportunity to get together with everyone. And right off the bat, thank Travis and David and Lance and Karen, the whole Knight family, for just being so incredibly gracious. We're streaming at Rumble right now, and I get to say hello to some of the chatters inside Rumble. And my ID on Rumble as we got ready before the program was the Roundtable Report, which typically is someone like Travis working the back end. So I got to actually write it down to everyone inside Rumble, how wonderful the Knights treat everyone. And I'm Gardner Goldsmith. You might be familiar with my work from MRC TV, which is no longer happening because we don't exactly see eye to eye on the Israeli genocide in Palestine. And they've had some changes over there. And it's great to be here. I do a program Monday through Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time called The Liberty Conspiracy. And we go Liberty Conspiracy live and take the opportunity to break apart the news of the day to try to derive long-standing lessons for liberty out of those things. And it's just terrific to be asked to join you on a Friday, get started on all these stories. And I will mention to you, if you want to find our program, we're on Rumble Monday through Friday. You can find the show stored there, of course, after the fact. And I've got my Gardner Goldsmith Substack, and you can head on over there. Every Sunday, we do something free for everyone for their Sunday reading called the Sunday News Assembly, which puts together about 23 stories each day that are maybe breaking news stories and you might find important. We add extra context, like my journalism for MRC TV. I have lectured in economics and political philosophy, so mixing all that in and getting your responses as well. And then Monday through Friday, for the paid subscribers at my Gardner Goldsmith Substack, I always joke around for the genetically superior, but for those people who are willing to help the show, we do a Monday through Friday news notes over there. So today on the David Knight Show, we're going to be looking at breaking news stories that will be part of today's news notes for my paid subscribers, as well as those people who join us tonight on Liberty Conspiracy will be looking at some very, very important ethical and historical notations to look at the news stories of the day with a little different context, hopefully, than typical talk programs, which is what I think David Knight helps establish. He brings an ethical and moral stance that I think few other people bring to the talk radio arena. So thank you for being here. Please share the links and spread the word. And don't forget, even though I'm hosting for David today from our bunker here in Russia in a completely different time zone where the Russians tell me everything that I should say because I am part of the great Russian propaganda machine, please take the opportunity to remember that David relies on your donations. And it's just amazing to see that people are dedicated to the ideas of freedom, the traditions of original American constitutionalism and freedom as far as a small government libertarian mindset goes. So if you like what I'm doing today and you want to offer that to David's program, that is wonderful. And we'll see you tonight on Liberty Conspiracy Live. So let's get into it and see what's on tap for the program on this, the 15th day of May, almost halfway through, and we're getting close to summertime. The David Knight Show, 5/15/26. Now, since we do broadcast from this very inconspicuous and unknown location here in Russia to spread the Russian propaganda that, of course, we all know that organizations like NewsGuard attacked me for when I worked for MRC TV, my own taxes were being used to silence me when I wrote things about the weave of the masks and the PCR tests and things like that. Well, we have two computer systems here, so we always check out the sound system by playing Tonight, Tonight, Tonight by Genesis. Oftentimes, the Russians sabotage me and they play something else. Let's see if they've got something special, like perhaps Smashing Pumpkins with Today is the Greatest Day I've Ever Known, or maybe they're sabotaging me. I see. So on today's program, and do let us know if the sound is not coming through for you. That's our way to check the system. We've got The Big Story brought to us by Joe Piscopo from Saturday Night Live, as he often does on my program. We're talking about the China Dishes edition. And some of these dishes were set up on the table long before they actually went over there to make it look like Donald Trump got an economic win. Some of the dishes are broken, such as, of course, Donald Trump looking at all consistent about the things he has said about Xi, the Chinese leader. We'll show you an example of that absurdity coming up. Plus, we'll look at fuel and Cuba and Iran. And yes, Donald Trump asked the Chinese to intervene and try to make sure that the Persian Gulf is open. And the Chinese are essentially telling him, it's open for us. It could be open for you too if you would lay off bombing people and barricading what you think is a barricade down at the southeastern tip of the Persian Gulf. We'll also look at a fascism report as we take a look at the corporations and the corporate heads that were joining Donald Trump on this trip to China. And I want to give you an example, one specific example of a chip maker that shows us just how fascist the Trump administration is. And when I say that term, of course, I mean it in the strictest political economic sense of the combination of corporate power, corporations actually being created by the state, and the state. And we'll look at one great example with something that I don't want people to forget, another phase that happened last year that I noticed wasn't really being reported. So I'll bring it up today. Maybe you'll get a smile or a grimace out of it. We'll look at a big immigration police state story on the corruption of the federal government doing something that is a usurpation of the Constitution. And there's nothing in the Constitution that actually gives the federal government power over immigration. And we'll tell you just how corrupt some of these people are in the immigration police state world. We'll also take a look at, you got it, the Supreme Court okaying the continued mail buys of mifepristone. And we'll take a look at Anthony Fauci sliding through and a big Ron Johnson Senate hearing. I have mixed feelings about Ron Johnson on a number of stories, but he was on the folks at Redacted. I've got my Redacted hat that I bought from them a while ago. And he went through a lot of the things that we ourselves have discussed about these. And I don't think he's just blowing smoke. So I do think that in many areas on the jabs, on Anthony Fauci, and on others, we're in agreement. I just wish that he would be more critical of Donald Trump, as some talk hosts I called one yesterday and said, you're talking about Anthony Fauci. You're not mentioning the man who started everything off with his March 13th, Friday the 13th emergency announcement, Donald Trump, in 2020. And then if we have time, we'll take a look at the Ukraine-Russia war heating up with another arrest of a Zelensky aide. They're getting closer and closer to laying pressure on Zelensky. And also the Russians launched over 1,000 drones Wednesday into Thursday in response to Ukrainian attacks during the celebration of their 81st anniversary of Victory Over Europe Day. And I want to touch on something before we go. I want to make sure that there is time for number 5. So I might move a few things around here. The idea of the just war theory from Augustinian philosophy, I think that's extremely important to note because, technically speaking, in a philosophical and moral sense, there is no such thing as a just war. Because, and I'll just mention it briefly to telegraph things, just war theory is based on state versus state conflict. And the basic thumbnail is that a state is only engaged in a just war if it is responding to aggression. The only problem with that is that if we look at the actual philosophy of the state of war as articulated by John Locke in his 1670 treatise, the second treatise on government, the idea of the state of war is that man is attacking another man. And Locke argued that people got together, somehow magically everybody agreed, to form the state to stop people from aggressing against each other. But if we actually look at his argument to say that that negates the concept that there is warfare going on between people, right? The state of war. The creation of the state is the creation of perpetual war. It just depends who's in charge. And you're not involved voluntarily. You're not allowed to leave. So the creation of the state is war. It's always war. And if you'd like to find out different, just try not paying for it sometime and you'll find out where the guns are pointed. So the idea of the just war theory falls apart because warfare, state on state warfare, relies on forcing people to pay for it, which is war against you. And that's not just. So as noble as St. Augustine was, we'll take a look at that and crack it open before the end of the program. And of course, I welcome your comments over at Rumble. I got to say hi to everybody in Rumble, and we can actually show the comments on the screen here. I want to say hi to so many of the good folks who are visiting us and ask you to share those links if you can. Molly Brown Dog is in the house. Yes, strains, how Iran is our big war. You never hear about what is going on in Ukraine anymore. You'd think that kerfuffle was over. Isn't it amazing? There's so much nefarious news, terrible news out there of the machinations of politicians that some things rise up and others don't get much attention. Luckily, I was able to discover RT. And of course, you know, it's state sponsored. But I do rely on RT a lot for their coverage of the Ukraine conflict. I think they do a really good job. And knowing that they were banned from the United States under the Biden administration also adds my thoughts to, hey, I'll check out RT. Maybe there's something to them. So thanks, everyone, for joining us. I know I'm not exactly as handsome as the man on the screen, David Knight, but I appreciate you being there. Let's get started and look at the news. And for this, I often do themes. I want to talk about some court news first, right off the bat. And so for that, let's take the opportunity to hear from the war against all of us. And it's going to be Edwin Starr to open things off. I always loved to play Edwin Starr. He was so soulful, and I appreciated all these things that he did in music. And so we'll talk about the war against us and the war against children as well. And then we'll get into kinetic war.
Yeah. What is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Yeah. What is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Say it again, y'all. Look out. What is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Listen to me. I despise. 'Cause it means destruction of innocent lives. War means tears to thousands of mothers' lives when their sons go to fight and lose their lives. I said war. Good God, y'all. What is it good for? Absolutely. Get said again.
That's right. Absolutely nothing. And we have the opportunity to touch on some stories very quickly, breaking stories for you that, first off, I want to go to that Supreme Court story. Let's hear from our court theme. Aha! Ha ha! Good old Perry Mason, Earl Stanley Gardner, one of the most popular novelists of the 20th century. Here is the TV theme. Is this a bill for the war? Uh-oh. Okay, we'll get into the news about Iran. We'll get into the Chinese visit in just a moment. But I want to give you this breaking news out of the Supreme Court. I've got a couple stories to show you comparisons here, just so you can see how different news agencies cover this. Here's Reuters. U.S. Supreme Court lets abortion pill mail delivery continue. I'm just going to touch on this briefly to give you an update on what's going on. This came out 15 hours ago. So yesterday, we got to see this. The Supreme Court on Thursday allowed the abortion pill mifepristone to be prescribed through telemedicine and dispensed by mail, restoring for now a 2023 federal rule challenged by Republican-governed Louisiana that had made access to the medication easier. Okay. Now, they call it medication. That's Reuters. So remember, I did a lot of work for the Media Research Center. So one of the things in that atmosphere, they're very hyper aware of what you probably are aware of too. Loaded words and words that mislead people or color things in a certain way that prejudice them before they actually get an opportunity to look at the meat of the story. So they call mifepristone medicine. Okay. If you say so. Is that like lead going in the brain is an injection? I don't know. But here is a little bit more. This one is coming to us from, let's see. I got one from CBS. See if I can give this one to you. Let's see. Yeah. CBS reports that it is protecting women who want to be able to use this. The screen is jumping around on me, so I'm going to go back to the Reuters report. So this is quite interesting. In fact, I've got another one. Let me go with this one too. Here's another Reuters report. This is interesting. Yep. Okay, so they say here that the brief order was unsigned and offered no reasoning. Okay, well, there is no reasoning behind this other than checking to see what the Constitution says. And what I will mention to you is that the New Orleans-based 5th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals on May 1st had ordered the imposition of a previous rule that required an in-person clinician visit in order to receive mifepristone. But now they're saying you don't need it in person. They can do it through so-called telemedicine. Well, what I think is interesting about this is, even though I am pro-life, I have to acknowledge the fact that the actual mailing of the drug is not a criminal act harming another person. Ethically, the drug is designed for one thing, to take a human life. But it's the ingestion of it that causes the death of the fetus, of the baby. So actually creating it, handing it out, those are not constitutionally prohibited because they're not crimes going over state borders. So technically speaking, the Supreme Court is correct. Ethically and morally, the creation of the drug, which only has that one purpose, I think shows that the person who's creating it knows that he or she is offering something that will facilitate murder. Now, whether one could logically or ethically argue that such a person is now an accomplice to murder and has provided the murder weapon, that's a possibility. But the problem with that is it's abstract. You don't know the single person who might be buying your product. So it's different than a gun, which can be used for self-defense. Mifepristone is never used for self-defense, right? So there's a lot of ethical and moral baggage here. But constitutionally, there's really nothing in the U.S. Constitution that allows the federal government to block the sale of this, as destructive and terrible as it is. It's the ingestion of it that is the major sticking point constitutionally over state lines. I also want to mention to you that the sale of this, of course, is something that if the states wanted to handle this, they could potentially do something about it. And then it would be up to the Supreme Court to revisit that case. I also want to show you something else that's really important right now as far as lives go. The warfare concept, the United States has been in a slow simmering war against Cuba for decades, of course. And it is rising more as Donald Trump has numerous times said, well, perhaps I'll be the president to overthrow Cuba. We'll take over Cuba. He once more mentioned making Venezuela a state. I mean, just completely deranged, off the beaten path, crazy concepts that he's putting out there. And as we look at lives being at stake, we can also mention that Cuba now has zero diesel. Their hospitals can't operate. Al Jazeera English gives us this. Cuba faces worsening nationwide disruption after officials say the country had completely run out of diesel and fuel oil, triggering severe blackouts and a partial collapse of the national power grid. Incredible. Residents in Havana have endured 22-hour electricity cuts amid a U.S. blockade. So just look. Cuba's energy crisis has deepened, with officials saying the country has completely run out of diesel. In Havana, they had blackouts for 22 hours a day as businesses shut down. Traffic lights fail and public transport halts. This is very complicated and it's affecting people badly. Children are not going to school. As you can imagine, the country has a fuel shortage, and that is not hidden. That is not a lie. Our economy has hit rock bottom. And this evidently is something that people in the Trump administration, like Scott Bessent, applaud, because they tried to do the same thing to the economy of Iran. And he thought that was great. He called it economic warfare. Well, as they engage in that economic warfare against Cuba, they're engaging in that economic warfare against you. And let me show you the mindset of people like Kevin Hassett. He says job numbers are down because we don't have this massive inflow of immigrants that are working. Yeah. Well, you're working for the administration that is removing all those people unconstitutionally. And you know what else he said? He said that the inflation numbers have gone up. And, well, it's really nothing to worry about because people are putting purchases on their credit cards. He honestly said that. What is that action a sign of, to leave a preposition dangling? It's a sign of people desperate because they don't have the immediate liquidity to buy daily needs. Kevin Hassett. So Kevin Hassett works for the administration that removed tens of thousands of field workers, removed in just California alone 17,000 truckers who are foreign truckers. And by the way, I mentioned when I was on David's show last time, I actually looked at the statistics. Foreign-born, non-native truckers are 10 times safer on the roads than native American truckers. And again, try to find the word immigration in the U.S. Constitution. You won't do it. It's a state issue. In the meantime, Donald Trump is trying to make it look like he's had a big success economically. Let me know in the chat if you are changing some of your plans on economics. Let me know in the chat if you are seeing prices skyrocketing for fuel. If you're making changes so that you drive less, maybe you won't be flying. And we'll take a break, hear some of David's great music, and come back and look at some of your comments, and then we'll explore Donald Trump in China, breaking the dishes. I'm Gardner Goldsmith, filling in for the David Knight Show, and please take an opportunity to consider donating to David as we hear some of his wonderful music from Last of the Mohicans.
Making sense common again. You're listening to The David Knight Show.
Well, it's always heartwarming to see the charm of Donald Trump, isn't it? It's dark comedy, perhaps getting darker and darker in Cuba and elsewhere. And before we even show the comments on the screen at Rumble, as the Russian team and I here in the studio in Moscow look at some of the tech and press the buttons to show that, I gotta say these comments are just really insightful and hilarious in some cases. We're talking incredible expenses for roasts purchased at Walmart. So let's show what some of the folks have to say here. We saw up a little bit earlier. We've got, Steve says, Guard, a great job today. Thank you again. Thank you. Then we have, so we've got people steal packages now, says Fidget Guy. That would have never happened 20 years ago. Epstein Island, and what a great handle. Walmart chuck roast cost $28 last week. Unbelievable. Fidget Guy says, I saw old people stealing packages on YouTube. It's become an American pastime. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. New Republic Rising 83 says, most U.S. truck drivers are fat, barely conscious, lethargic turd biscuits who eat the gut bomb S. Well, I will tell you, I suspected as they were removing so many truckers, it's basically lockdown 3.0 after we had Trump pushing the lockdowns in 2020 with his emergency announcement in March of 2020, triggering the national state emergency medical emergency program that had been promulgated by Johns Hopkins and adopted by so many states. Those were all contingent on a national emergency being announced in Washington. Trump announced it. All these state governors crushed most of the Bill of Rights, freedom of association. They punished people by shutting down their businesses without any trial, completely against the Fifth Amendment, the Sixth Amendment, and the punishment breaches the Eighth and 14th Amendments. So all those things were just unbelievable. You saw, the paddler out on the coastline of California, completely alone. The cops were the ones who were introducing the possibility of spreading something as they apprehended him on the beach. Just absolute madness, totally insane stuff. And I think about how we see that was lockdown number one. Then his tariffs came through as lockdown number two last year. $350 billion in expenses. $175 billion of it has to be returned, according to the Supreme Court, because the IEEPA that he used is unconstitutional. And they only looked at it as, well, we don't see that you can put a tariff on. The IEEPA allows you to block products. Well, there's nothing in the U.S. Constitution during a time of non-war that allows Congress to block products either. So they can't cede any power, even a magical, mystical power that they invent themselves of blocking products. The tariff power is granted to them, but they can't cede that to the federal government on the executive side either. It's up to Congress to pass statutes. Every tariff that Donald Trump has imposed on us, it's a tariff on us. That $350 billion is money that could have been in the system paying for higher fuel prices because Donald Trump was blocking Russian fuel, paying for new businesses to start or businesses to stay afloat. But they can't now. They can't do that. So Donald Trump was desperate on the economic side. And let's show the kind of mentality Donald Trump showed towards us, the utter lack of respect that Donald Trump showed towards us on the economy, and the lack of respect that he showed towards Xi Jinping, because they're pretty much one and the same. He goes back and forth on everything. And literally a day before Donald Trump went to China, he said, quote, Xi Jinping is a horrible leader. He's sending weapons to Iran. I'm placing permanent sanctions on China. Okay. Now, I went through on Thursday in my news notes what the tariff rates were the last day of December 2024, and what the tariff rates were on that day, Thursday. Tariff rates, generally speaking, are between tenfold and 15-fold higher now than they were when Joe Biden left. And I did a study of Japan, China, the EU as a general EU bloc and various EU nations, plus Britain, Singapore, India, and Taiwan, and Russia. And they're all higher. And at some points, I'll show you what the stats are. I'll go back to Thursday's news notes. And if anybody wants to check it out, if you're one of my paid subscribers there, you go down at the bottom. The study is there for you. I wanted to make sure I give you that information about once a month. But just yesterday, after he attacked China and Xi, he said, "You are a great leader." Literally. Check this out.
Such respect for China, the job you've done. You're a great leader. I say it to everybody. You're a great leader. Sometimes people don't like me saying it, but I say it anyway because it's true. I only say the truth.
I only say the truth. I only say the truth. He didn't do that when he swore on the Constitution. Say the truth. So obviously, the sentimental, emotional side of this was after the initial signal that Xi sent by not meeting Donald Trump on the tarmac. People say that the meeting actually went fairly well. And the overall theme of this is that Donald Trump and some negotiators brought over these members of different high-tech big businesses like Jensen Huang of NVIDIA, Tim Cook of Apple, Elon Musk. And they were there to work their magic, of course, as the favored in the club. Did you get the club sandwich? Because I didn't get the club sandwich. Friends of Donald Trump. And what's amazing about this is that, in a way, this is a form of fascism. And I'm going to give you an example. They have promised purchases of 200 Boeing 737s because they can't purchase military hardware from Boeing. But Boeing, of course, is very much clued into feeding the federal machine, and the federal machine wants to give them as much as possible. So they couldn't technically sell military hardware to China. So they're allowing Boeing to sell to China with non-military Boeing 737 passenger planes. One of the things that I thought was interesting here is that Xi Jinping has used this term, and you probably have heard this a lot over the past 36 hours, that Donald Trump, hopefully, and China would not fall into the Thucydides trap, which is actually a reference to a 2017 article based on a book that came out in the Atlantic by a professor from Harvard. The man's name was Graham Allison. And it was called Destined for War: Can America and the Chinese Escape the Thucydides Trap? And that, of course, is a reference to the Peloponnesian War, the 5th century BC, between Spartans and Athenians, as Athens was on the rise, and the Spartans looked at them as a possible threat to their hegemony. But what's interesting about that is Xi's comparison is not actually apt anymore, because China's ascendancy has already occurred. They have a more dominant economy than the United States. Their economy, their GDP is 30% larger than the United States now. So it's not whether or not he was doing it with, rhetorical legerdemain. I don't know. But I thought it was interesting. And it is interesting to hear those terms once in a while and remember history and old civilizations that have fallen by the wayside and maybe have some lesson for us. I especially think about Rome and the Empire of Rome and how they overstretched themselves and caused massive inflation for their monetary unit, shaved silver off their coins and tried to form new coins to keep paying their friends and cronies all over the Roman Empire, up in Gaul and everywhere. So let's talk about Donald Trump's payoffs in one instance for a company. I want to talk about NVIDIA. Let me give you an example of just how corrupt some of this is. Now, and you might remember. So remember, as Donald Trump started his new administration, 10 companies saw investment of the United States government over the course of 2025 last year of up to 10% investment in their stock, meaning that the federal government, in a very brown shirt, Mussolini would be proud Donald way, and Adam Smith is rolling in his grave. They engaged in mercantilism, otherwise known as fascism. Adam Smith, 250 years ago, released one of the most incredible, seminal, and really interesting books. Of course, the great book 1776, that is essential reading for economics. And it's called The Wealth of Nations. That's actually the short term for it. It's essentially, I think, an exploration into the prosperity and wealth of nations, or something like that. The Scottish economist and really political philosopher. He has a 2-volume set on ethics, which is absolutely amazing. He termed what we now know as crony capitalism as mercantilism, the combination of state power and corporate power at your expense. Corporations trying to, in economic terms in the classrooms we would discuss, called rent seeking, trying to take advantage through political means what they couldn't do through a competitive market, to block their competition, to make the consumer pay for something they normally wouldn't have paid for, or shut down the consumer's opportunities to find a competitor. So this sort of behavior was very big in Mussolini's Italy with the fascists, of course, was very big in Nazi Germany, was actually very big in communist Soviet Union, and very big in China. It's big in most collectivist nations, whatever label they want to apply to it, whether it's done under the form of National Socialism, which is what Donald Trump is doing, corporate National Socialism, or it's done under the worker socialism. It's inevitable that the state, having that power, all that power, is going to start playing favorites with corporations. And that's what happens here in the United States. So let's look at one example, that being NVIDIA. And here it is. Let me show you on camera if you want to see this. Thank you, Russians. I said, remember when the U.S. government turned Intel into a fascist entity last year by buying 10% of its stock? Remember that? And that was just one of 10. NVIDIA, check this out. This is how corrupt this is. NVIDIA got a chunk of Intel just before the federal government did its purchase. They plunked down a $5 billion stake in September of 2025, shortly after the government's stake was announced, 10% stake was announced. And that move helped Intel's stock. And this sale of NVIDIA chips, well, check this out. NVIDIA chips are now allowed to be sold now, thanks to Donald Trump. This is happening. They will be able to sell some of their special 2400 chips for AI, the H200 high bandwidth memory chips are now being allowed to be sold to the federal government. Now, why the federal government is stopping something from being sold or allowing something to be sold, that's a separate and important question. In the land of the free, I didn't know we had to get permission to engage in free market commerce with people. But in this case, they've ramped it up in the opposite direction. The power of the state is seeing the facilitation, not only allowing these sales, but the negotiation of getting the Chinese government to facilitate Chinese government corporations to buy H200 NVIDIA chips. So the corporation that mixed itself into Intel, which already had been given a 10% purchase of the federal government, or they would have gone under. Intel is saved by the feds. NVIDIA buys a portion of Intel, and then NVIDIA gets the extra bonus within less than a year of getting a massive sale of their chips to China. But it's not even that bad. It's worse than that, because the NVIDIA H20 and H200 chips, in exchange for export approvals for that, NVIDIA agreed to, get this, give the United States government a cut of the sale. The U.S. government, and this is what I learned yesterday, I still don't know what the exact number is. It's reported as at 2 different places between 15 and 25% of this sale. The U.S. government is getting that from the sale that Donald Trump arranged for NVIDIA, which already helped out the fascist Intel. So Trump plunks money, your money, into Intel. NVIDIA plunks money into Intel. NVIDIA gets the gravy less than a year later by not only getting this sale to China facilitated by the federal government, but promising the federal government a quarter of the cut. As I noted in my notes, this is similar to the British Crown and the British East India Tea Company or the Dutch East India Tea Company. It was essentially the same thing in 16th and 17th and 18th century England. As they started the British East India Tea Company, the members of Parliament, as Parliament was on the ascendancy and the royalty was losing strength, the members of Parliament in their colonies would set up these areas where different corporations could go in and have exclusive sales, like they tried to do in America, the exclusive dominant sale of tea. And lo and behold, some of those parliamentarians would somehow get bennies and gimmies with the British East India Tea Company. And then if they left the British East India Tea Company, left the Parliament, they somehow would start working, you got it, for the British East India Tea Company. It's like I said, if you look at Fox News, and I believe it was September or October 2008, when they were trying to pass the Obama American Recovery Act and bail out banks like Goldman Sachs, then so-called conservative Senator Judd Gregg from New Hampshire went on television when one version of it didn't pass late at night, and he was fuming angry. And he said to maybe Sean Hannity, one of these hacks, oh, we're talking about people's retirement, Sean. We got to pass this government spending and ginning up of money to feed the banks because it's the retirement of people I care about. And, of course, they bailed out Goldman Sachs with billions of dollars. And, of course, that printed money harmed everybody's retirement by reducing the buying power of every unit of money that was out there. But lo and behold, Judd Gregg retired that coming winter, late winter, early spring, and left the Senate. And guess where he went to work? You got it. Goldman Sachs. Just amazing. It's so corrupt. It's just incredible. Oh, my goodness. Now, I don't have specific numbers on things like beef and soybeans, because those aren't available yet. But it's very clear that Donald Trump is trying to make up for the damage that he did to American farmers when he imposed all these tariffs on all these other countries. And they started to switch to other avenues to be able to buy what they wanted to buy. Things like soybeans, things like beef, and other things. Now, I want to show you, I believe this is my May 13th news notes. And at the bottom, I believe I've got the statistics. If you want to know where things stood before and where things stand now, I'll show you what things look like as far as tariffs go. Here we go. So this might be of interest and import to you. Let's see. For Brazil, the approximate effective U.S. tariff rate on imports was 2 to 4% in December of 2024. It's 10% now. A five-fold increase. For China, it was 19 to 21% in December of 2024. That's up 25 to 32% as of May 2026. For Japan, it was approximately 2 to 3% in December 2024. It's up to 13 to 15% now. This in addition, again, to all of the fuel blocks. And Donald Trump had the Chinese President Xi agreed that they would buy more American fuel. As I noted, there's already a backup to buy American fuel. Tankers aren't getting fuel on time, even when they're trying to get to the United States. And as I mentioned, you can do this research. Donald Trump announced earlier this year the amazing, wonderful news that there was going to be a new refinery starting up. Well, that new refinery startup was actually put together by Joe Biden in 2024. It's the only new refinery, that they have had for 20 years, and it won't be open until 2027 at least. Construction doesn't start on it until July. So they don't even have the refining capacity to make gasoline for us. This is a worldwide economy. This is a worldwide commodity. So it's very obvious that the price hikes we're seeing now, if they don't open up the Gulf, not only are they going to get worse, even if they do open up the Gulf now, they're going to get really bad. We're going to be like Cuba. The Japanese tariff now is at 13 to 15. For England, the tariff was 2 to 3%. It's now 10%, a five-fold increase. For the EU countries, it was 2 to 3% because it was most favored nation trading status. It's now 9 to 10%. For Singapore, it was 1 to 2%. It still stands at 1% for some, but it's gone up to 10% for other products from Singapore. Oh, man. For India, it was 3 to 4%. It's now 10%. And of course, it was even higher at 100% at times for Russian traded stuff that India was reselling. And for Canada, it was 1 to 2%. Now it's 5%. For South Korea, it was 1 to 2%. It's now 13%. These aren't good numbers, right? And we're talking Walmart with prices that are now double, 4 times what they used to be for a pound of roast. It's insane. And this is what Donald Trump is doing to us. Don't forget, everyone, please keep in mind, they are not only stopping truck transport and removing thousands of truckers, making the movement even more expensive fuel-wise, but driver-wise, they're removing people from the fields. Let me give you an example. And I won't go often when I'm on David's show. I talk about how there's no federal purview for immigration. And I won't go into detail on that one. But I want to show you the example of just how corrupt the immigration police state is. Trump's new ICE chief once intervened to deport a woman at the behest of the president's friend. This was a divorce proceeding. And the man who was friends with David Venturella of the Immigrations and Customs Enforcement Agency leading it, the man was going through a divorce, found out that his wife was in some trouble, and contacted this new head, the new head of ICE. And that woman was put into a cage for 3.5 months. And by the way, when we talk cages, you might have heard me mention that both Pam Bondi and Tom Homan worked either directly or indirectly for GeoCorp. GeoCorp, one of the biggest Republican donors. GeoCorp is the largest private prison or business in the world. GeoCorp. Well, Tom Homan worked directly for GeoCorp before he joined the Trump administration, and Pam Bondi worked for a PR firm and made hundreds of thousands of dollars through GeoCorp with that firm, lobbying for GeoCorp. So you've already got a woman who was heading up the DOJ, checking out the complaints of people who were getting kidnapped and caged, that they were not getting habeas corpus hearings, which is required by the Constitution for people that the federal government or any level of government are going to hold. And the only way that they cannot do that is if Congress universally lifts the writ of habeas corpus for everyone. And again, these are not reserved rights for Americans. It's the way the machine of the federal government is created. So even if we don't talk about the fact that the word immigration is not in the federal Constitution, we can discuss the fact that habeas corpus has not been lifted. And so if someone is arrested by any form of polis in the United States, they cannot be held for a, as they often term arbitrarily, long period of time without the body of evidence, habeas corpus, being presented and an accusation of crime being presented in a court. Otherwise, they have to let people go. This is a tradition that goes back to William Penn when he was arrested on the streets of London in the 1700s. This is fundamental to American jurisprudence and common law. This is what they are eroding. And look who now heads up ICE. That's right, this man Venturella. Venturella is known not just as a career ICE agent. He was the former executive at GeoCorp. So once more, you've got the mixing of corporate interests with the central government. Is it off base to mention that central planning was something that Americans used to laugh about or think about in dark terms with dystopian novels like 1984 or dark films like Brazil? How cumbersome it was to have the one body decide that one size fits all, and how it invited corruption and the rotating roundabout doors of people going in and out of government from the corporations that would feed the government to make sure that the politicians who got elected favored those corporations, and then perhaps those politicians could go work for the corporations. Well, this is what you've got with GeoCorp and the immigration police state. We've got 3 examples of it, and let me show you how absurd this example is. So Ventuella is known not just as a career ICE agent and former executive at the GeoCorp, the private prison company that owns some of the ICE detention facilities. And I'll mention again, I've done it on my program, but not on David Knight's show, the governor of New Hampshire. I've mentioned part of her fascist ties. When the Ukraine conflict war between Russia and Ukraine was really starting up, Kelly Ayotte, then former senator, before she ran for governor, appeared on Fox News. It was basically about 10 months into the Ukraine war, and said, we've got to get more weapons to Ukraine. We've got to help them defend their sovereignty. Never mentioning that NATO had expanded into the Iron Curtain countries, contrary to promises that Jim Baker had given during the W. Bush administration and numerous European leaders had given to the Russians, in an agreement that said, if the Russians would allow Berlin and East and West Germany to reunify, then NATO promises not to expand into the Baltic region, the former Iron Curtain nations. Well, the Russians agreed to that, and the Atlantic Council and NATO completely dropped their promises, as they always do. And they expanded. They admitted Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Georgia. 2005, 2006, Dick Lugar and Barack Obama went to Georgia, went to Latvia, went to Lithuania and Ukraine to establish bioweapons labs that Victoria Nuland admitted existed in front of Marco Rubio 4 years ago now in 2022, when Rubio was a senator. And she used the term, remember the term Ukrainians. We're working with the Ukrainians to make sure that the biological research materials are recovered. It's unbelievable. They've got cancer clusters. They had anthrax outbreaks around these areas. And one of them in Georgia literally has Dick Lugar's name on it. If you doubt me, you can look it up. They have an hour-long documentary, and I showed it on Liberty Conspiracy in parts at 6 o'clock. I've shown it from RT. It's 52 minutes long, about those chemical biological weapons plants that they had, these laboratories. They talk to people. They go through cemeteries of their neighbors and loved ones who had died. Well, he died of cancer. He died of cancer. This guy died of anthrax. And Lugar's name is on it. So you talk about the fascism, right? What's astounding here is that this is happening as we're seeing the United States pushing more fascism on the immigration police state, the detention facilities with ICE. It's stunning that they do these sorts of things, and people seem to think that they live in the land of the free. Let me show you how bad this is. This is someone was disappeared for a while because she was on the wrong side of a divorce. That used to happen in Cuba, I heard. I got disappeared. In Russia, he was disappeared. He was erased from a photo next to Stalin. Well, check this out. This man intervened to deport the mother of the child of Paolo Zampoli, the man who introduced Donald Trump to Melania Trump. After this woman was detained in a Miami jail, calling ICE's Miami office to have her grabbed before she could be released on bail. So this guy, David Ventuella, when he worked for ICE, got a contact from this man, Paolo Zampoli, who was the man who supposedly introduced Donald Trump to Melania. I thought it was Epstein. According to the New York Times, Venturella emphasized during the call that it was a, quote, favor for a friend. He called this cell where she was being held, the Miami office, and said he was doing a favor for a friend of the president. That's not corrupt at all. A favor for a friend of the president. Zampoli, who had been locked in custody in a custody dispute with the woman, Amanda Ungaro, contacted Venturella after learning she had been arrested in Miami on charges of fraud, and she was going to be released on bail. So Ungaro was subsequently held instead in ICE detention for 3.5 months before being deported to Brazil. And Zampoli denies using immigration enforcement to gain an advantage in the custody battle. That's what we're looking at. And by the way, there's another story. A new ICE deployment wave could spread into more than 40 states in a major escalation of enforcement nationwide. Yeah, because, of course, they belong in the states. Oh, that's right. Article 4, Section 4 requires the states to ask for federal assistance to maintain their constitutional Republican form of government before the feds can go in a time of non-war. If there's no declared war, a president can't just walk into a state. They've got to be invited. And if you want to check it, it's called Article 4, Section 4 of the U.S. Constitution. We'll be back on the David Knight Show. Let's check out your comments and see what you've got to say. Please remember that you can donate to David's show and find great products at the David Knight Show store. And don't forget, of course, to check out David's blog on Substack and follow him at Libertarian, where we are currently streaming. And we're also streaming at Guard Goldsmith, amazingly.
Liberty. It's your move. And now, the David Knight Show.
All right. Well, everyone, thank you for the gracious, kind words at Rumble. Great to see everyone. And I really appreciate you chatting in there. And of course, anyone who wants to leave some longer term comments that can be seen, just put them in the comments section at Rumble. And of course, please restream, retweet, everything on the David Knight Show. I'm Gardner Goldsmith, formerly of MRC TV, here on David's program. And I want to take the opportunity to show you a little something that you might find interesting. And this, of course, is the story, unfortunately, about Mike Huckabee. And Mike Huckabee is the kind of person who really, I don't understand why he's involved with politics. He's a person who is ignorant of a lot of facts. He favors essentially bloodshed and land theft, and he overlooks the incredibly unethical, unconstitutional actions of the United States supporting a genocide machine. Let me show you a little something here from Mike Huckabee. This comes from Judge Andrew Napolitano's program. And this is the latest. As just yesterday, Israel celebrated the 78th anniversary of the Nakba. Absolute destruction, takeover of homes, killing of thousands. This is Mike Huckabee's attitude. Incredible.
Ambassador to the United States, or so he sounds.
U.S. ambassador to Israel.
Right.
Yes.
On Tucker Carlson, Chris Cut
Yes.
number 6.
What he says is dangerous in the same way that when people throughout history have been demagogues and they have incited entire populations of people to hate others, and they base it on hating people without justification, without cause, and based on outright lies. This is a dangerous thing. And when you marginalize, let's say Jewish people are marginalized, whether they're white people, whatever you marginalize, and you dehumanize them, you make it easy to justify not just hatred, but violence and murder toward them. Where do we get a society where people think it would be okay to kill a Charlie Kirk or a Donald Trump? When you dehumanize them to the point you say, their views are so dangerous, we can't tolerate them, we must get rid of them. That's why I say it's not enough to just ignore Tucker Carlson. We need to confront him, and we need to correct him, and we need to let people know that many of the things that he's saying are demonstrably untrue.
Agree.
Society that
Oh my
demonized
God.
the Palestinian people. I can't believe he said that. I didn't realize what he was saying.
Isn't that amazing? Literally on the anniversary of the Nakba, the dehumanization and stealing and theft and destruction of those people coming on the heels of a population coming from Eastern Europe, transplanted there by the end of the British Empire and international machinations. And he's calling Tucker Carlson a person who says that the Israelis are inhuman, or that he dehumanizes Donald Trump.
You just cannot make this stuff up. If there is dehumanization, literally calling people animals, it is how the Israeli government and a lot of the population, I'm sorry to say, views the Palestinians, whom they have just murdered in the tens of thousands and kill every day, men, women, children, and grab their land and torch their houses and refer to them as despicable subhuman beings. What is this guy? Where does this delusion come from?
Are you kidding?
The vulgarity of it.
Yeah.
Frankly, you can't make this stuff up.
No, I
because
kiddingly
he's
referred
ambassador-
to him as the
Sorry.
U.S., as the Israeli ambassador to the U.S., because that's what he sounds like, as opposed to the U.S. Ambassador to Israel. Why the
This-
diatribe against Tucker Carlson? Because Tucker Carlson's interview of Huckabee exposed him for his monomaniacal prejudices against the Palestinian people.
That is exactly right. And not just against the Palestinian people, against the Arab world. Because what Huckabee said, and it was shocking how naive and how vulgar what he said was, that Israel, sure, it can go on to conquer Lebanon and Syria and part of Egypt, because Huckabee knows that the promised land goes from the river of Egypt to the Euphrates, as it says in the book of Genesis. And Huckabee, being a so-called Christian Zionist fundamentalist who reads words literally from ancient texts and then says, sure, go make war as you like, take property as you like, should not be holding any position of responsibility in our government, much less being ambassador to Israel.
Well stated. Great stuff. That, of course, Jeffrey Sachs with Judge Andrew Napolitano. And I want to head on over back to the news notes at my Substack for this one from yesterday, as I want to show you, of course, my work at MRC TV, we would look at comparisons of different journalistic outlets. And here is the way that Gaza was covered versus Ukraine covered with the death of children. I said, this is not surprising, but still is angering. Trita Parsi of Responsible Statecraft writes, wow, The Intercept reviewed more than 12,000 print articles and 5,000 TV segments. Check this out. I think this really tells me something. I'd be interested if you get the same impression. I think it's pretty clear. They reviewed 12,000 print articles and 5,000 TV segments. I thought it would be bad. I had no idea it was this bad. No wonder Gaza killed what little credibility mainstream media had. In the New York Times, Israel's right to defend itself was invoked 99 times, only once for Palestine. On CNN and MSNBC, it was invoked 755 times for Israel, but only 8 times for Palestine. Emotive words such as slaughter and massacre were used frequently when Israelis had been killed. They were never used in print when Palestinians were killed. In Ukraine, 262 children were killed in the war, and it was mentioned 4,222 times. In Palestine, more than 10,000 children were killed, but it was mentioned only 3,632 times. And there's the chart regarding CNN and MSNBC disproportionately mentioned child casualties in Ukraine compared to Gaza. In orange, Ukraine, 262 deaths, 4,223 mentions. And in Palestine, 10,000 deaths, 3,632 mentions. The disproportionality is astounding, and I think it indicates something very profoundly ugly. And let's not forget, of course, the Nakba on May 15th, 78 years ago, erasure of much of the Palestinian population, and they're continuing to do so. Meanwhile, Steve Hanke, professor and also connected with the Mises Institute, mentions that Israel continues to relentlessly bomb civilian areas in Lebanon. Lebanon's health ministry reports that 12 Lebanese have been killed in the last 24 hours by Israeli forces. And you might have seen the absolutely heartbreaking visuals of ambulance workers in Lebanon opening up the back of an ambulance and discovering 2 of their friends dead as they got transported back there. Just unbelievable. Terrible, terrible. But as this all happens, I don't want to distract from the fact that New Yorkers are protesting about Israel. And what exactly are they protesting? Well, if you go over to my profile on X, you'll see that we're streaming, which is totally awesome. But in addition to that, they're protesting the fact that the New York Times actually exposed what we've known for a long time, that the Israeli government allows for the rape and encourages the rape of many of the prisoners that they have in their cells. These would be civilians, oftentimes women and children, who are put into their cells, but the rapes occur mostly against males. And adult males. And for years, Israel has been pulling women and children and men off the streets of Palestine, Gaza, as they make it smaller and smaller, and bringing them in and not charging them with anything. Sound familiar? Habeas corpus. And torturing them with cold, with sound, with food deprivation, starvation, a lot of things like that. And also releasing them back on the streets only to get them again and pull them aside. It's unbelievable. Let me show you these protesters as they went about what they thought was right to protest actual exposure of real information. Terrible. Unbelievable. But they continued to do it. And unfortunately, we're not going to be seeing much help from the Trump administration. He says, we're doing what we're doing in Iran to help Israel. Truly astounding. Amazing. Now, as far as Iran goes, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov offered a very sensible assessment of one of the key reasons Netanyahu and Trump attacked Iran. Why? Of course. Well, Lavrov names overlooked agenda behind the Iran war. Now, this is quite interesting. The U.S. is seeking to prevent normalization between Tehran and the Arab states and erode support for Palestine, Russian foreign minister has said. Yep. The U.S. and Israel launched the war against Iran in order to prevent the normalization of Tehran's relations with the Gulf states, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has told RT India. The campaign was intended to push the Arab countries closer to Israel and pressure them into abandoning support for Palestine, he said. Iran responded to the U.S.-Israeli airstrikes launched on February 28th by targeting U.S. bases in the Gulf states, along with energy and port infrastructure linked to U.S. operations. In an interview published on Wednesday, Lavrov condemned the attack on Iran as, quote, unprovoked, and described Tehran's response as an act of self-defense. Quote, we have no doubt that when plans to stir up aggression against Iran were being hatched, one of the goals was to prevent the normalization of relations between Iran and the Arab states, Lavrov said. Now everything is being done to ensure that reconciliation never happens. And I think it's a very, very dangerous game that Donald Trump plays because he's harming the economy. And of course, he is going to be seeing even more power plays inside the Middle East. So I have a feeling that Donald Trump was probably told about this by Xi Jinping. And I don't think that Donald Trump is in a very easy position right now because he has been a puppet of Israel for far too long. And he has to continue fighting Israel, for Israel. And yet the Chinese, with such a powerful economy, can hold back rare earth minerals, and they will continue to see their fuel products moving through the straits. So how's that going to work? Donald Trump is trying to impose an embargo, but it's basically Russian roulette. They can't stop everything. So will the fear of an American blockade at the southeastern tip of the Gulf incentivize or disincentivize shippers? Will it make them so frightened that they won't participate? Just to let you know, at the Strait of Hormuz, Iran's international waters are 12 miles. And they actually cross over in the same way that from the south, the waters of Oman cross north. Iran and Oman are the ones that control that strait. Those are not international waters. They can lock those up if they want to, according to their vaunted international agreements on the world stage. We've got some great comments here from people. Let's see. Ashley is in the house. She says, "Hey, Gard, nice to see you at this hour." Oh, thank you very much, Ashley. I appreciate that very much. That's kind of you. Absolutely. And let's see. We've got Martin Thorne is in the house. He says, "I dumped 5 gallons of vintage June 2024 gas in the van yesterday. Ran like a top." Oh, I like that. That's fantastic to see. Now, I want to give you the opportunity to hear a little bit more about what's going on with Ukraine and touch on a few other big items that are out there. Because as we noted, Russia has launched numerous missiles and drones against Ukraine. So it looks to me like Vladimir Putin is doing his darndest to ramp things up, and that he is going to try as best he can to wrap things up with Ukraine in the next 6 months. We will see. Let's hop on over here and go past a few of the things I've got loaded up so that we can get to this from RT. Here we go. We'll get to that Augustinian stuff to close off the program. Here's this RT coverage. This is, I think, important. And you'll see how it looks like maybe Western forces are applying pressure to Vladimir Zelensky.
Russia's defense ministry has announced it's conducted a large-scale strike against Ukrainian military and energy infrastructure.
In response to Ukraine's terrorist attacks on civilian targets in Russia, the Russian armed forces launched a massive strike using long-range, precision-guided weapons from land, air, and sea, including Kinzhal hypersonic missiles and unmanned aerial vehicles, targeting Ukrainian defense industry facilities, military airfields, and fuel and transport infrastructure used by the Ukrainian armed forces. The strike's objectives were achieved, and all designated targets were destroyed.
Well, the Russian Ministry of Defense didn't release, a precise number of strikes, but judging by reports from third parties, for example, this could well be the largest strike of the war so far, retaliation strike on Ukrainian military targets, on airfields, on military production facilities, utilizing 1,400 drones over a period of about 24 hours. So a huge, a massive in scale strike, again, retaliation for Ukrainian attacks on Russian infrastructure and civilian sites, including a slew of high-rise apartment buildings hit by Ukrainian drones in Russia over a period of weeks. In Moscow as well, a high-rise building almost in the center of the city struck by Ukrainian drone. But I think this strike was more about getting the point across to the Ukrainians that we will retaliate and it'll be worse each time. But bad news on the military front isn't all that Zelensky must contend with. On the political front, there's a circus going on where Zelensky's closest associate, the head of his administration, the man dubbed Zelensky's right-handed in Ukraine, also known as his left-handed, his feet and his mouth, ears and eyes, the head of his administration, Andrei Yermak, the Grey Cardinal of Ukraine, is being made an example of by Ukrainian anti-corruption agencies. Well, Andrei Yermak has been charged in a massive corruption scheme, at least one for now, and that has to do with houses, or rather palaces, that he was building, one for himself, another being built there was for Timur Mindich, who is also a longtime friend of Vladimir Zelensky, the man believed and touted in Ukrainian media as his wallet, the man that Zelensky delegated all of his money to in order to grow his finances in various schemes. Timur Mindich is, of course, also a suspect in this case and others. tremendous corruption amounting up to hundreds of millions of dollars, potentially billions of dollars. But Andrei Yermak, for now, being charged, accused of essentially laundering millions and millions of dollars on the construction of 4 mansions, one for himself, one for Timur Mindic. One of those mansions believed to belong to Zelensky himself. We've seen, of course, wiretap publications showing that Andrei Yermak talked to the designers, the contractors, and personally oversaw the construction of those elite mansions just outside of Kiev. The bail at this bail hearing has been set to $3 million, which is down from $4 million, which was asked for by Ukraine's special anti-corruption prosecutor. But Andrei Yermak himself at the trial said that, it's a huge sum, but he'd ask his friends.
I don't have that kind of money for bail, so the lawyer will be working with friends and acquaintances now. I deny all charges. I have nothing to hide, and I will be filing an appeal.
Yermak himself, he, despite the scandalous resignation last year when this corruption scandal emerged, he himself has somehow managed to hold on to power, essentially carrying on with the functions and the powers, the reach, the influence of the head of the presidential administration while officially not being so. And that has caused, a lot of ire in Ukraine. People are angry. This guy involved in corruption, according to all these wiretap publications, he's still somehow running the show behind the scenes. No surprise then that he got egged at this trial. For Zelensky, there's trouble now that it has emerged that Andrei Yermak, the spider that ran Ukraine from the shadows and continues to do so, still maintained power. We'll remember, of course, how he leaked to the public after his, again, resignation, that he would head to the front lines to fight in a war that has claimed hundreds of thousands, perhaps more than 1 million Ukrainians. He now says that that wasn't so.
Just after your dismissal, in a New York Post comment, it seems you said that you were going to mobilize, go to the front, but you didn't do it. Why?
The truth is that I never made any comments. It was my personal correspondence with a New York Post journalist in which she asked about my plans, and I said that I would think about it.
Yet an unfortunate turn of events, another unfortunate turn of events for Zelensky himself. Again, mired, though his name hasn't officially appeared in these publications, mired again in this scandal when it's all his friends that have benefited from these corruption schemes, that have defrauded, embezzled hundreds of millions from the Ukrainian state, from Western taxpayers, from that is aid money, of course, that was stolen. And it is, of course, worth mentioning that the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine, the Special Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office, well, it is unlikely that they would have launched anything such without backing from the West, and they are believed to be controlled by Western intelligence agencies, law enforcement agencies, including the FBI. And it is doubtful whether they would have embarked on this anti-corruption investigation, challenged Zelensky himself without a green light from Washington and Brussels.
Are Zelensky's closest associates and Western sponsors starting to feel the heat? Because earlier we spoke with a former officer of Ukraine's security service, Vasily Prozorov, who says Yermak's prosecution for corruption is only the beginning and may lead to much bigger revelations about Western-backed money laundering. And it's being said those in Brussels and Washington are starting to sweat.
So I just want to pause it there, everybody, because you might remember this man, Mindic. He was discovered to have been very corrupt a while ago. And guess where he fled? That's right. he went to Israel.
This is just a step, a very small step. $10 million is nothing. This is peanuts in comparison with the amount of money that were embezzled during the Zelensky rule. We're speaking about billions here. This is one incident. $10 million, this is nothing for Zelensky. But I can conclude from all of this because in law enforcement, there is such a thing, is a parachute. I don't know if you understand this or not. It is when you have one proof, one piece of evidence that is 100% evidence that can be proven, and then you can keep working. You can look for more facts because you know that this person will be persecuted because of this fact. And what can I say about this situation in general? I saw it with my own eyes, how NABU and SAPO were established, the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine and Specialized Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office. So I'm convinced 100% that behind NABU and SAPO, there are US, not European Union, not UK, but American bodies. They were established under American guidance with the assistance of American instructors with the technical support of the American side. NABU detectives, they were trained by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Prosecutors of SAPO were trained by the Department of Justice in the US, and Yermak is the closest person to Zelensky. Apart from being a close friend of Zelensky's, Yermak is the person who knows about the hidden assets of Zelensky, about all kinds of bank accounts, all kinds of properties, real estate, and about a hidden stash, something that you keep for the worst day in your life. And Yermak knows about this kind of stash.
It seems that the funding for Ukraine has now moved essentially from America to the European Union. Do you think Brussels might now have any reservations about pushing more money, giving more money to Kiev?
Well, of course, the official position of Brussels would be they would welcome their max arrest because that would mean that there is some effort to fight corruption. Because corruption is a universal evil that in democratic countries we are trying to persecute. It's a sacred thing for any democratic country to fight corruption. So officially, Brussels will support this. Unofficially, I believe they are panicking in Brussels as well, because you need to understand that corruption in Ukraine does not exist itself in isolation. Corruption in Ukraine is not only corruption by Kiev authorities, it's mostly corruption by the Western authorities, by Western officials, because Ukraine is a black hole of corruption now. The money is being embezzled not only by Zelensky and his inner circle, high-ranking officials from Europe, from the European Union, also have to do with this from Europe, and all kinds of Western bodies in Western organizations. Yermak is aware of these, and I would not be surprised if some days later Yermak would commit suicide in his cell, or he will be poisoned by something all of a sudden because he knows too much.
So I want to pause it right there and go back to some of the coverage that we've offered regarding things like the war in Ukraine and what I mentioned a little bit earlier about how the West backed out of many of their agreements. And they had promised that NATO would not expand. NATO expanded. We saw all of this come to a head in late 2013 as the United States, Victoria Nuland, Jeffrey Pyatt, John McCain, Chris Murphy was there, Lindsey Graham was there, Amy Klobuchar was there between the end of 2013 after Yanukovych got reelected. And he decided he was going to work with Russia on energy and get a loan with the Russians rather than working with the EU. The EU didn't want that. So they pulled the trigger and they initiated the Maidan coup. And the Maidan coup, of course, saw what was depicted as the Ukrainian government attacking people in Maidan Square when it turns out that they appear to have been Western influenced snipers that killed protesters that were brought in there. So Yanukovych is out. They bring in Yatsenyuk. Victoria Nuland is caught on a phone call talking with Jeffrey Pyatt about putting in the new government. They're literally discussing working with Nazis in the Sloboda Party, Ole Tyanibok being one of them. And on stage later, when the new government is put together, John McCain, Amy Klobuchar, Chris Murphy, they're all brought together with people on the stage like Ole Tyanibok, the Nazi from the Sloboda Party. So what's astounding there is that so many people in the West tried to depict the Russian response later after they waited years after 2014 when the Ukrainian government from Kiev moved down with the Azov battalion and killed so many people in the Donbass region, which is ethnically mostly Russian. They depicted Vladimir Putin's move to go in and protect those people, and to make sure that an agreement they had with Ukraine to be able to control the port of Crimea, that was a treaty that they had, that those things would be upheld and those lives could be saved. They depicted that as the Russians initiating the aggression, which is really just an amazing thing to consider. But the other thing that's fascinating about that is people would start talking about just war. And they would say, well, that's not a just war. And the traditional idea of the just war is that a nation state can engage in kinetic warfare hostilities with soldiers if they are acting defensively, to save civilian lives, to act defensively for their sovereignty as a sovereign nation. Now, that has a lot of baggage in there. First of all, as a sovereign nation, that sort of anthropomorphizes it. But I think we understand when one is looking at the nation versus nation conflict, it's understandable that people start to use shorthand and things like that. So they'll talk about the Russians did this or Russia did this, as if it's some body rather than, one body, rather than a composite of a bunch of people making decisions. And somehow that's emblematic of the people, which is an even more, incorrect way to look at things for any nation state, whether it's Russia or America or Iran or Egypt or Israel or whatever, right? Now, people can take polls and try to get closer to what do these people think in this country and so on and so forth. But again, when it comes to state-on-state violence, I want to talk a little bit about the so-called just war theory. So I want to go over here and show you something that I've called up. This is just a quick search to show you what people typically will find if they do a search. This comes from Bing, right? So the key principles of Augustine's just war theory. Just cause. Augustine argued that war should only be waged for a just cause, such as self-defense or the protection of the innocent. The intention being the war must be to restore peace and justice. 2, legitimate authority. War must be declared by a legitimate authority, such as a sovereign or government, rather than by private individuals or groups. This ensures that the decision to go to war is made with the responsibility of the community in mind. That's kind of loaded, isn't it? So the idea is that it's legitimate if a sovereign government, rather than a private group of individuals, decides that somehow if the government does this, they've got the community in mind. That's a bit of a leap of logic, isn't it? Because the government is just people too, and they have their own incentives. Then we've got right intention. The motivation behind the war must be morally sound. Augustine emphasized that the ultimate goal should be to advance peace and justice rather than personal gain or revenge. Then there's proportionality. The violence used in war must be proportional to the injury suffered. This principle seeks to limit the destruction caused by war and to ensure that the means used are not excessively harmful compared to the ends sought. Okay. And then last resort. War should only be undertaken after all other means of resolution have been exhausted. This principle underscores the importance of diplomacy and negotiation before resorting to armed conflict. So, as we note, Augustine's just war theory emerged in a time when the Roman Empire was facing numerous conflicts and moral dilemmas regarding warfare. His writings laid the groundwork for later thinkers, including Thomas Aquinas, who further developed the theory within the context of Christian ethics. Augustine's ideas have influenced both religious and secular discussions on the morality of war throughout history. Okay, now, there are obviously some logical problems with this, and I want to dig into some of those and then go back and check out your comments over at Rumble and say hi to everybody there. Steve says, just cause equals just us. Trust us. Absolutely. That's good. Caught that already on the comments. So we'll hop over here. And so let's just say Augustine arguing that war should only be waged for a just cause, such as self-defense or protection of the innocent. Now, as I mentioned, in 1670, when John Locke wrote the Second Treatise of Government, and he did not put his name on it till years later, he was following up on Leviathan by Thomas Hobbes and others like Thomas Aquinas, who had discussed the idea of what is man's place in relation to the state. Hobbes had written that the state should be all-powerful. And I've given this example before, but Hobbes essentially said that in the state of nature, mankind would be constantly nervous. And he says, look around you right now, and you'll see that people lock their doors and they carry weapons with them when they go outside. And in the state of nature, without a powerful government, without government, people don't trust each other. And so you've got to have some all-powerful government that will maintain law and order and stop people from appearing to be threats. It's got to be the policing power, and that state's got to have ultimate power. It can't be questioned. You can't overturn it. It can't be broken up. It's got to be a central authority. So as I noted to students in my classroom, essentially what he was saying was you've got all these atavistic people who are separated as little dots. So you need an all-powerful ruler over them to rule. That would be the king with his crown. And I said, what happens if you pull back from that and you have now another fallible ruler who, just like all other people, has distrust for other people, and he's a different ruler, and he has all these people. Now you've got concentrated armies and people who don't trust each other. So Hobbes' concept doesn't work. But moreover, it's the definition of the so-called state of war. The state of war, as described by Hobbes and Locke, comes to you in what they call the state of nature, where without the polis, without the state itself, the government, people are at each other's throats. And amazingly, Hobbes gave the example of people not trusting each other from his era in England with kings. So he's there talking about how, well, in the state of nature, people don't trust each other. They carry weapons. Look around you. People carry weapons and they lock their doors. So he's giving the wrong example. He's giving an example from the state of the state. The polis already exists. They've got a king. And he's saying people don't trust each other in the state of nature. Dude, you're showing the state right now where people don't trust each other. In other words, you're undercutting your entire argument. But in addition to that, John Locke picked up on that. And he carried the water of Hobbes. Hobbes is called a social contract theorist in philosophy, right? Saying that people somehow form a social contract with the government. Well, in society, that's different than government. Society is the set of arrangements and ideas that we come up with separate from the state through commerce and culture and traditions and interpersonal agreements. It's essentially anarchism. We don't have the government. We form these things ourselves, and we exclude people that we don't like. So there you go. These people say, well, in that state, everybody doesn't trust each other. People can't come together to form bonds of safety themselves. So somehow, John Locke says, people somehow do come together to form the state. And the state will prevent people from preying on each other as they would in the state of nature. So he says the state of nature eventually leads to what John Locke calls the state of war. And it's constant chaos, constant predation, constant attacking, right? And so therefore, somehow magically, every person agrees we're going to form a state, which is impossible because the state, if that were to be the case, wouldn't be a state. It would be a voluntary group. of people forming some club or a business, everyone voluntarily joining it. It wouldn't be the state. So already Locke is confusing himself, and he's confusing the reader. But the worst part about it is that they claim that they're avoiding the state of war. And the state itself is the state of war. And so, for example, if we go back into what we set up here for our schedule for the program, in the background here, you'll see the quote from Frederick Bastiat. I'm just going to move this. Government is the great fiction through which everybody endeavors to live at the expense of everybody else. Now, it's been phrased slightly differently with a little higher phrasing, where I've heard it, government is that great fiction by which everyone endeavors to live at the expense of everyone else. So a little bit more elevated diction. But Frederick Bastiat, the 19th century economist, was 100% right. Government is the state of war. That's what it is. It just gives a legal artifice to people claiming they have power over other people and they can take their stuff, supposedly for other people's protection, which is not what the state does. The state is a coercion machine that only operates through force, extortion, and threats of violence against people. So if we go back to Thomas Aquinas and the so-called just war theory, we can see that any war that's operated by the state, technically speaking, even if they try to anthropomorphize it, they can't eliminate the fact that the state only gets its funds through predation on people. So there is no such thing as a just war. And there's no such thing as a justice department or a justice system in a political polis-based system. Why? Because the foundation for its funding comes from injustice, from forcing people to pay, because not everyone agrees to be part of it. Again, if they agreed, it wouldn't be a polis. A polis is a forced mechanism forced onto people. So the founding fathers, they said, well, essentially, the truth of it, even as they wrote the Constitution or the Articles of Confederation, but even as they did that, they were assuming for other people, we, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union. No, it's not we, the people of the United States. It's we, the people in this hall in Pennsylvania. That's who's saying this. It's not we, the people of the United States at all. And then they say in order to form a more perfect union. So at least those people, they put barriers up and they said, we're going to establish this perpetual motion machine of government. Well, you can have governance without government, the polis. And again, that comes through understanding that in the state of nature, people can come up with their own rules. We come up with these all the time. And if people in the state of nature are incapable of coming up with their own rules, how are they capable of forming rules within a governmental system? I thought they were incapable of coming together to form some system of governance. And of course, they tell us that this America is this great experiment in self-governance. Can you govern yourself? No. What that is it's shorthand for a separate state that's being formed, breaking off from England. It's not self-governance at all. Self-governance is you being left alone by aggressive people telling you that you have to live a certain way. And again, in history, there were plenty of examples of cultures that didn't have taxation and political systems that were government per se. They were voluntary through clans and tribes, family elders being seen as the people who would adjudicate disputes. That's how kings really started. They were the elders in the families or the tribes, and they helped adjudicate disputes within the tribes and with other tribes. Now, for the rest of St. Augustine, he says legitimate authority. War must be declared by a legitimate authority. Well, government is not legitimate. And even if 99% claim that it is their government, if it's imposed on the 1%, that's morally illegitimate. There is no arguing about that. And a person who argues for it can't say, well, that 1% did not run away. That is the argument of thieves and gangsters. Then there's right intention. The motivation behind the war must be morally sound. Augustine emphasized that the ultimate goal should be to achieve peace and justice. Well, of course, as I said, under the state, there is really no such thing as justice because the justice system is operated through taxation and force, and there is no peace. It's perpetual war, as Frederick Bastiat noted. Then there's proportionality. Now, this is on the state-to-state level. I understand the argument on the state-to-state level, but to actually break it down and get a better understanding on a moral, ethical level, on a political philosophy level, there is no excuse for not analyzing the fact that Augustine's argument doesn't hold. On a state-to-state level, it's clearly understandable. I think everybody can grasp it, right? Yeah, it's aggressive to initiate kinetic warfare activity at people, to claim you're doing it for defensive purposes, which is what the United States has done since World War II in every instance. And even in the instance of post 9/11, they attacked Afghanistan. They drummed up this story of the ties, didn't prove anything, and they never even declared war. They went with the authorization to use military force, even though Ron Paul introduced a declaration of war. And he only got 3 votes, and he didn't even want for the action to happen. But he said, you've got to do it properly if you're going to do it. So we understand that there's got to be proportionality. Violence used in war must be proportional to the injuries suffered. This principle seeks to limit the destruction caused by war and to ensure that the means used are not excessively harmful compared to the ends sought. And then war has to be a last resort. Well, if Marco Rubio is out there telling people admitting we initiated this, and then pretending that it's defensive, well, it's not a last resort. It's not proportional. It doesn't have right intention. There's no legitimate authority, even on their sense of it, declared by legitimate authority, because they never declared war. And there's no just cause. So at every instance, the United States activity in Iran does not hold. It doesn't work. And finally, I want to give you some of the final information on the warfare front from antiwar.com. I'm going to leave this up on the screen big before we say goodbye for the day at noontime here on the David Knight Show. And I'm Gardner Goldsmith filling in for David Knight. And please remember that if you like any of the websites that we're showing, pause it, head on over, open a new tab. The anti-war people are wonderful folks, great people, and they occasionally do fundraisers. They just finished their most recent, so-called quiet fundraiser. And they have been doing wonderful work in fighting for freedom. It's been a great thing. So I appreciate what they do very, very much. So here is the latest on what's going on with the international front. And first, I want to mention this information about Iran. House narrowly defeats Iran War Powers Resolution. It lost in the Senate by 1 vote. Fetterman was a Democrat who voted against the War Powers Resolution. And as Dave DeCamp notes in his most recent video for antiwar.com, the War Powers Resolution is itself unconstitutional and waters down what is required by the Constitution, a declaration of war. And Dave notes that over in the House, you got it yesterday, it lost in a basically tie vote, 212 to 212. The House on Thursday narrowly defeated a war powers resolution that would have directed President Trump to end the U.S. war against Iran as the U.S. continues to enforce a blockade of Iranian ports and is considering restarting the full-scale bombing campaign. Now, Trump gave it a pause when he went over to China. I think he's going to start it again, and it's going to be a big mess. The bill failed in a tie vote, everybody, 212 to 212, with 3 Republicans, Thomas Massie of Kentucky, who is in the race of his life. I hope that he can win next week. Tom Barrett of Michigan and Brian Fitzpatrick of Pennsylvania voting in favor of ending the so-called war. Just one Democrat, Representative Jared Golden of Maine, voted no. And Representative Warren Davidson, who supported a previous war powers resolution, voted against this war powers resolution. The vote marked the 3rd time a war powers resolution to end the war against Iran was brought to the floor of the House and was the closest the bill came to passing. The first bill failed 212 to 219. The second was blocked 213 to 214 to 1. The Senate has voted 7 times on an Iran war powers resolution, and the latest, held on Wednesday, came close to passing. The bill failed 49 to 50 with 3 Republicans, Senators Rand Paul, Lisa Murkowski, and Susan Collins. That's Murkowski of Arkansas, Collins of Maine, Paul of Kentucky. They voted in favor of it, and John Fetterman voted opposed to it. So, as Dave DeCamp noted in his video from yesterday, last night, the War Powers Resolution is obviously unconstitutional and waters down the declaration of war required in the Constitution. It gives the president 60 days to be able to engage in kinetic activity. I don't see that in the Constitution. And Congress is essentially supposed to reauthorize, but they have watered even the War Powers Act down, and they don't do anything. So they just keep allowing the president to continue with his military conquest. Now, a little bit more over at Antiwar to give you the further information. Israeli Lebanese officials meet in Washington to discuss a ceasefire while this is going on, and that ceasefire will essentially have nothing to do with Hezbollah. They have done this before. They're killing people south of the Litani River, and they're going to take that land for Israel. And the Lebanese government, which is basically a vassal of the United States and does pretty much anything that the Israeli government wants, will go right along with it. So here's the latest. Lebanon is said to seek a ceasefire that actually ceases Israeli attacks this time. We will see. Over the course of Israeli attacks on Wednesday, the Lebanese Health Ministry reported at least 22 people killed, including 8 children. That's particularly relevant because Thursday's talks were scheduled in D.C. between Israeli and Lebanese officials regarding extending the current ceasefire that expires this week. But it's not a ceasefire, of course. The Israelis broke it day 1. Israeli officials seem to be going into talks particularly upbeat, saying they're certain they and Lebanon share the same goal. Well, writes Jason Ditz, while a ceasefire is indeed still considered desirable, at least in theory, in Lebanon, the goal in these talks is to actually get Israel to agree to a ceasefire that functions in such a way that Israel will stop attacking Lebanon and killing dozens of people pretty much daily. Yeah, talk about the Daily Report. And finally, at antiwar.com, I want to give you this. Saudi Arabia floats a Mideast non-aggression pact with Iran. This is significant. If this happens, it is likely that Saudi Arabia will, for a longer term, lay off Yemen because they were basically a proxy for the United States against Yemen up until a couple years ago. And Donald Trump really had better start thinking about getting out as soon as possible. Saudi Arabia, writes Dave DeCamp yesterday at Antiwar, has discussed a non-aggression pact with Middle East states and Iran in conversations with its allies about what the region will look like following the end of the U.S.-Israeli war against Iran, the Financial Times has reported. The report noted that the U.S. Gulf Arab allies are worried they will be left with a powerful Iran in the region and a scaled-back U.S. military presence. Satellite images show that many of the U.S. bases across the region have been badly damaged or destroyed by Iranian missiles. The Saudis have floated something similar to the 1975 Helsinki Accords, which were meant to reduce Cold War tensions between the Soviet Union and U.S. allies in Europe. Recent reporting has revealed that both the Saudis and UAE launched direct strikes against Iran during the U.S.-Israeli bombing campaign, though the two Gulf states appear to be taking a much different approach, as Abu Dhabi has been more openly hawkish, while Riyadh appears to want to ease tensions with Tehran. Yeah, the UAE is in trouble big time, because if Iran strikes the UAE desalinization plants, that place is not going to be functional. Two diplomats speaking to the Financial Times questioned whether the UAE would want to be part of any non-aggression pact with Iran. Israel would also certainly oppose it, as it seeks a return to full-scale war and has envisioned the Abraham Accords, the 2020 normalization deals with the UAE and Bahrain, as part of an anti-Iran alliance. So they want UAE's help. They want the United States to be able to launch attacks from UAE. And both Saudis, the UAE, and Abu Dhabi, Bahrain, they know very clearly that they're not getting the defense that they thought they were going to get because Iran can strike those areas very easily. Yeah. Well, I've got to get ready to go, everybody, but let's check out your comments over at Rumble. All tech is DARPA tech, writes Don't Frag Me. And says the Front Porch Media, time to pick a side if you're a Middle East leader. Well stated. Tactical Boy 88, Netanyahu had the judge investigating him murdered. I think you're right. Larkin Rose has a great YouTube channel, says Soylent Goy. Absolutely right. Larkin's great. He is terrific. And yes, Tactical Boy 88 says also those rich merchants back in the day were constantly offering gifts and trying to buy people off. As you can see throughout history, it obviously has worked. So true. So true. All right, let's go back and check to make sure that we've done everything that I wanted to cover today for the program on the David Knight Show. Please join me tonight for Liberty Conspiracy at 6 o'clock on Rumble and on X. I'm at Guard Goldsmith on X. And we will see what happens as Cuba is dying for fuel. What will Donald Trump do when he returns from China? And are we going to hear any more about the fascist NVIDIA? Are we going to hear more about some of these other companies? Oh, and by the way, I'll show you the other companies before we go that are part of the fascist arrangement for Donald Trump. We've got Intel, 9 to 10% common stock purchased by the United States government. MP Materials, up to 15%. Lithium Americas, 5% of one part of the company and 5% of another venture called Thacker Pass. Trilogy Metals, a 10% stake. And USA Rare Earth and others in critical minerals. Stakes reported between 8 and 16%. So we'll go with 24, divide by 2, 12% range for U.S. fascism with those countries. And then there's U.S. Steel. Don't forget, the United States has what they call a golden share granted as a condition of approving a foreign acquisition deal. I don't know exactly how much that is. I couldn't put that into the news notes, so I apologize about not getting that info. I wish I had it. And then don't forget also that during the CARES Act, the Trump administration pushed for and got Congress to allow for the Federal Reserve to purchase bonds of any company that the Federal Reserve wants to purchase. They can go with any one, and they don't have to disclose it. They don't have to have anything on their bottom line, nothing at all. They can do anything they want and purchase any bonds they want. And it can be as flimsy as they want it to be because they can just print up more money. Final thoughts before we go, everyone. And thank you so much for being so kind to me, filling in for David. Thank you to Travis. And I was going to mention at the start of the show, Travis and I talked last night as we got the tech together and everything, looked good and everything like that. And it's as much a pleasure to talk to Travis as to do the show. And that is an amazing thing. I am so blessed to have met David and know such a good person and to have been brought closer to God for this and to you. So I want to wish you all a blessed day. Oh, and by the way, if you want to watch Liberty Conspiracy, on Thursdays, we're doing something called Theology Thursdays. And Travis was on with us and talked about C.S. Lewis. It was great. And I'm hoping to get David on a Thursday night live or recorded. And that will be a lot of fun. So please remember Liberty Conspiracy. I'm no longer with MRC TV anymore. So, of course, it's intellectual busking. Just like David, we ask for your support. Please support the David Knight Show and consider donating to the David Knight Show. It's very important. And thank you all for being there. We're going to close off shop tonight. And you know what? Right now, I'm seeing that there's a bit of a tech problem. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to disconnect separately and go on to the infinity screen here And we will disconnect without the theme right now, actually, unfortunately. So that's just going to be the way that it is right now. I see this on the screen. I'm not going to be able to call this up. Just the one glitch for the day. I'm so frustrated. But thank you all for being there. You will see perhaps the infinity screen. There we are. And I will say thank you and fare thee well. Have a great, great rest of the afternoon. Take care. And we'll see you tonight. It's Fiction Friday. I'll be reading a short story on Liberty Conspiracy Live on Rumble and on X at Guard Goldsmith. Take care.
The Common Man. They created Common Core to dumb down our children. They created Common Pass to track and control us. Their Commons Project to make sure the commoners own nothing. And the communist future. They see the common man as simple, unsophisticated, ordinary. But each of us has worth and dignity created in the image of God. That is what we have in common. That is what they want to take away. Their most powerful weapons are isolation, deception, intimidation. They desire to know everything about us while they hide everything from us. It's time to turn that around and expose what they want to hide. Please share the information and links you'll find at thedavidknightshow.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. If you can't support us financially, please keep us in your prayers. thedavidknightshow.com.